Raise your horns high and let your spirit flow. It's the classic metal wrap-up show. Feel the rush, let the loudness grow. It's the classic metal wrap-up show.
So, Alan, we got you back, and Eva will join us here in a little bit, but you're promoting the book Sound and Fury, which comes out June 24th. And you hinted at that the last time we chatted, that there was something in the works, the book, and here we are, within a few weeks from its release, 3 weeks or so. So tell us, well, give us the backstory on how you got convinced to do this, because I know you were apprehensive about doing a book. Definitely more apprehensions, I think, about autobiography. That wasn't really something it sounded like you were really interested in.
Well, to begin with, I am not a great fan of rock and roll books.
Right.
And a reason for that is they all seem to have the same story arc. And we start with the deprived childhood, then we move into the undivided young bloods who storm the world, then success and money come along, and wives and mothers and girlfriends and valets and whoever, and the band dissipates, loses its focus and its sense of purpose. And then the book gets written full of recriminations, finger pointing, and blame. It was somebody else's fault. And most of these rock and roll books have that same story arc, and just the names change.
Right.
So I'm not a big fan of that. It's like done and doesn't need to be done again. Obviously, I have had years, decades of people asking, when are you going to write your memories? And I did actually try writing a book, putting a manuscript together years ago. And I fell into the trap of doing the chronological history, or the historical chronology.
Right.
And I found it tiresome and boring and depressing. I tended to look at the mistakes I'd made, the mistakes the band had made, the things that we had not done that I thought we could do. And I sent it to someone because I was hoping they'd come back and say, nah, I'm not in love with this.
Right.
And instead, I got an email from Slash that said, book is brilliant, finish it. Which was an oh fuck moment.
Right.
Because I wanted someone to give me an excuse to shelve it. I also wanted someone to blame.
Right.
I could only blame myself when I put it on the shelf. And I left it there for a long time, but there were two people who kept nagging, because that's what they did.
Right.
One of whom runs several magazines in the United Kingdom, so deals with writers every day. So to get their encouragement was flattering at first, and then pressure subsequently. And I finally gave in to an email they sent me, and I went, okay, now I've got to figure this out. And of course, you've got to have a little bit of self-realization. If you're going to be so full of yourself, so you're going to sit in front of a computer and write a story, you'd better have a bit of a sense of self. And the sense of myself is I'm old, I'm in the way, and I'm really just an old jukebox sitting in the kitchen corner.
Right.
And sometimes people will come in and put a quarter in the jukebox, and I'm obliged to tell a story. Obviously, the quarter takes the shape of, say, a glass of port. pour me a good glass of port, I'll tell you a story because I'd like another glass of port after that, and I'll tell you
Right.
another story. So that was it. That was it. I looked at the whole thing and I said, you don't need to spend 20 chapters talking about being bombed in the East End of London when you was a nipper. Just get the fuck on with it and tell
Right.
stories. Start straight off with what people want to read about. They want stories about the bands
Mm-hmm.
and the musicians and the executives. So just shut the fuck up and get on with it. So
Right.
it's not a Guns N' Roses book.
Right.
They're in it, obviously. They were a part of my life at one point. It's not a Great White book. It's not an Alan Niven book, although I am the storyteller.
Right.
It's just a bunch of stories that I thought might entertain and maybe illuminate a little bit.
Right.
So that was it.
It.
And I got a demand
Mm-hmm.
from the publisher, and they said they wanted 60,000 words,
No. Wow.
which to me was utterly oppressive. You mean I've got to sit in front of this computer until the spider's web from my skull to the screen? I mean, I'll be here forever.
Right.
Well, I'm not the greatest computer technician, so it took me a while, but I finally figured out how to get a word count
Mm-hmm.
on what I'd written. And I was utterly stunned to find that I was over 60,000 words. So at that
Yeah.
point, Ruben, I went, done.
Yeah.
That'll do. There's your 60,000 words. Go break a leg with it. And then, of course, it takes the publishing world a long time to put a book together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's even with minimal edit, because I was very fortunate. My publisher, the extent of their edit was basically punctuation.
Right.
They didn't try and rewrite or suggest that I change this word or that paragraph. They were just looking for punctuation stuff. Even so, I surrendered the manuscript to them over a year ago. They announced it over a year ago, and then told me how long it was going to take, and I was going to take that long. I was hoping for it to be out at Christmas,
Right.
but here we are. Suddenly, it's a few weeks away,
Right.
and that year has gone. That year has gone quickly. So here we are.
And real quick, just because we're not going to give away, there are specific stories that I really enjoyed, that were great in the book, but I'd rather have people buy the book because I've heard interviews in the past, and I've done a couple book interviews too, where it's like, do I really want to give away some of the stories in the book? But one of the things that you did is you made these into like tracks, right? Like as in on an album. So you really went old school in that regard as well.
Ruben, you're dead on. Thank you. Part of the thinking of how do I construct this, I thought to myself, well, in certain respects, some of my favorite albums are like good books. They have the ability to stand the test of time. And you may have bought that record 30 years ago or 40 years ago, but it is still wonderful today. And I thought to myself, if you want your book to have a chance of standing the test of time, why not approach it like an album? Every story is a freestanding story, a freestanding track. And if you do it well enough, the needle goes in on beginning of side A and will eventually come out at the end of side B. So yeah, everything is a freestanding track. And I did treat it like an album. And I think I call the chapters tracks, if I remember correctly.
Right.
And at the end of the book, there's a section that's called album notes, like sleeve notes
Yeah.
that won't be on the audio. Is on the book.
Hmm.
So it's like, here are your track notes. Here's the album. Here's your album notes.
Real quick, because I was gonna do a follow-up question about an audiobook. So that is in the works, and that is going to be you reading the book.
Yeah, it's been recorded. Again, it's taking time to edit and to
Hmm.
make sure that it sounds the way it should sound. And for me, it was, I would have loved it if somebody had said, so and so should read this book.
Uh,
And that would have got me off the hook. But instead of that, I got a lot of people saying, you should read it, you should read it, you should read it. And what I wanted to do was read it once. I didn't want to be
mhm.
backtracking and retracking and picking it apart. My attitude was, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to read, say, 3 or 4 sections, that's it. Then I'll come back and read 3 or 4 more sections, that's it. But I wanted to get through it in one go. And there are moments where I change a word or I flip something around. Because if it was going to be a book as an album, it had to be in the moment.
Right. Was there, and I don't want you to get into the details of the particular chapter or story, but was there one that you really had to dig deep and maybe hit up some other people that were there for recollections of any of the stuff that went into print?
No,
Okay.
I relied on first person memory and first person recollection. And what I found really stunning was how many quotes had seared themselves into my recollection and my brain. That people had said things to me, and I went, "Oh, wow!"
Hmm.
And it was still there all those years later. I would, I had 2 bands break simultaneously, Ruben. I don't think many people can claim that.
Right.
And that was an incredible workload. I did not have the luxury and time to be a fuck off or fuck around. I did not have islands down in the Caribbean like Doc McGee where I could go down there with bands and girls and party all the time. I was working hard, 365, 7 days a week. So there was a clarity of memory, and there were a lot of experiences and statements that had a tremendous impact on me at the moment that they occurred or were said. So they stayed with me, and I didn't have to go to someone and say, what happened here or what happened there.
Right.
I preferred to rely on the clarity of my own recall rather than bounce off somebody who might or might not have had a recall or might not have been there. So it's first person.
Right. Just so I know you're pressed for time, and Evil just joined us, and we've covered a couple things related to, well, you heard some of it, but I'm taking the stance of not revealing any of the stories or anything in the book, because obviously there's some excellent stuff on there. Uh, and then I'll ask one more question, and then you can pick it up there with anything you have, Evil. That way we
Totally.
we maximize the time we have with Alan. Alan, so what's one word? I know you're a man of many words, but what's one word that you would say describes this book now that you have that you're rolling it out here on June 24th?
Well, that's a terrible question to lay at my feet because
Well, I'm a terrible interviewer.
no, you're a great interviewer. It's a terrible question because I'm the last person who should comment on their own work. Um, one of the things I learned back in the day is when you finished a record,
Mhm.
when it was mixed, when it was mastered, when we'd flown to New York and gone to Sterling Sound and had it mastered and prepped for manufacture, I learned very quickly that at that point, the songs and the record were not mine anymore. They belonged to whomever bought it because they would react to it through the prism of their own experience and their own comprehension and their own understanding, and may not necessarily connect to what exactly it was you were on about. And I found with my own relationship with albums, there would be certain songs that there would be a progression of comprehension. That the longer I lived with that record, or the longer I lived with that song, then I'd find another layer of meaning in it. And that other layer of meaning usually came through an experience that I'd had that I went, now I get what he's on about. I've just been through that.
Right.
So I'm not necessarily the best person. What I did try and do was, somebody sent me a really, really good book the other day about a very famous musician and an incredible band that I've adored for years. And at the end of reading it, I was kind of happy because I could draw a distinction between his book and my book. His book was written for fans and at times was very detailed in its musicology. I tried to write my book for the curious, not necessarily the fan. If somebody's in a bookstore at an airport and they're looking through a rack and they pick out my book and look at the cover and go, yeah, that might get me to Omaha,
Right.
I'll be happy.
There you go.
Because those are the kind of the people that I would like to
Sales.
engage and entertain. It's not designed to be a manifesto or a claim to a historical perspective that's incontrovertible. The quote that I give at the beginning of the book is that rock and roll is God's occupation for the unemployable.
Yeah. Right.
There's your in.
There
all
you
right?
go.
And the other quote comes from Macbeth, which is absolutely perfect and wonderful because it talks about idiots strutting their stuff, making lots of sound and fury that means nothing, and their tales are told by an idiot. Thank you very much. Here I am, the idiot, telling the tales that signify nothing.
Right. Well,
But on the other hand, Macbeth is a very dark play that involves
Right.
power grabs, crazy wives, witches, betrayals. So there's a clue in there. There's a little bit of meat on the bones here of this skeleton.
Right.
But it's not me trying to claim this is the actual history of these people. It's just a bunch of stories. And hopefully, after you read one story, you're interested in reading the next one. And by the time you get to the end of the album, you go, yeah, that had playthrough. And it was interesting. And I did learn a little bit.
right.
And hopefully, most of all, they laugh.
Right. Well, I'll punt it to Evil. I know he's got a couple questions at least.
Well, I made my background here the rainbow, and I'm waiting on my pizza. So I figured we got some time. And I thought that would be fitting for what the questions I'm going to ask and some of the people that you've worked for there, Alan, or worked with. So my question is not so much in relation to specifically any part of the book. We want the people to go out there and buy the book and get the book and read the book like I've been doing. But why do you think there's such a difference, almost like polar opposites, when working with Capitol and the people in that record company and Geffen? And one was obviously what you were dealing with Great White, and one with Guns N' Roses. And really, my question is, how come it seems like to me, as an outsider, just a layperson here, doesn't it seem like Capitol has stood the test of time with their archaic way of doing and seeing things? Whereas I think maybe Geffen was more hip and more trying to stay on the edge of what was next. And I just think it's like almost complete diametric opposites. Am I wrong?
I can answer your question in 2 words. It's a very, very smart and curious question, and it has an answer in 2 words. David Geffen. Okay. The difference is this. Capital were part of the EMI group, a multinational conglomerate. Multinational conglomerates have corporate structure. They have committees. They may have several people in an A&R department. Geffen was owned by a single individual. And the immediate difference there is that the single individual can exercise their taste through the power of their ownership. So, rightly or wrongly, I could look at a lot of labels and go, they were brilliant because of singular ownership. And I would go beyond Geffen and I'd go straight to Island Records, Chris Blackwell. And you look at the stuff that came out on Island, Bob Marley, Free, just Traffic. What a great label that was, because Chris Blackwell was exercising his taste. He was not responsible to a power structure of a multinational where people are looking at, are we getting a good dividend on the stock, and we think we can minimize mistakes in exercising artistic exercise if we put everything in a committee, etc., etc. The only time that committees work, as far as I was concerned with the record label, was Warner Brothers in the early 70s, because their committee had a great philosophy. And their philosophy was, we let the artists take care of the music because the music will take care of the company. So they didn't push people to finish records quickly or prematurely. They let them deliver when they thought they were worth having. And Warner Brothers went through a really great period in the early 70s. And then they got sold to Kinney Parking Lots. It was owned by a guy, I think, called Ross, if I remember his name. The ancient history here, I'm trying to dredge it out of my head. And because Warner Brothers had this kind of philosophy of operating, they had to have cash on hand to pay the bills, to pay the salaries, to keep the business running. So they were cash rich because that was their business model. And when they put a record out, it refurbished and then built up that cash reserve even further. Kinney came in and took all that cash and put it into other investments. So suddenly Warner Brothers were knocking on artists' studio doors and saying, you got another 3 weeks, we want the album, we want it out, we need the cash flow. And that was the end of the golden age of Warner Brothers. So my simple 2-word answer of David Geffen is actually a long ramble about committees and individuals. But that's what it boils down to, is that if you have a label that's run by an individual, they will exercise their determination, their taste. And in the case of Appetite for Destruction and David Geffen, who else would have allowed Tom Zutaut, his A&R guy, to spend $365,000 on a debut record by a bunch of junkies? Oh my God. How Tom kept David on side, I don't know, but thank God he did. Now, by comparison, working with Capitol, I delivered Great White albums as their producer and their main writer at the time. I would produce an album and deliver it for about $115,000 on the average. And Capitol were amazed at that. Heart, by comparison, were in the 350 to 400 range, or a little bit over, when they were delivering a record. So Capitol were very happy with me, very impressed. And of course, if you want to know what was the basis of my ability to do that, I'll give you an answer in 3 words: pre-production, pre-production, pre-production. I would basically know the tracking order of the album before note 1 was done. I'd also know we'd maybe lose a track or two, and we'd have a couple of tracks floating around that maybe I was identifying as that may come through in the studio, that may not. But when I went into the studio, what I wanted was to know what the song was, the notes, the beats, everything in it. And that way we did not waste any time trying to invent while the studio meter was running. We knew what we were going for. Because we had the confidence of knowing what we were going for, we put ourselves in a position where we could get the happy accident. And one of the things I always used to do in the studio was keep a roll of half-inch running all the time. For that moment when somebody played something and you go, what the fuck was that? Wait, what was that? And they go, well, I don't know, I've forgotten already. No worries. Yeah. I've got it on a half-inch. Let's play it back. Let's include it in the arrangement. You know, so we were set up for the happy accident, and they happened. Something would happen in the studio that was totally unexpected because somebody was goofing around and it was between takes or something, or they fucked up and did something that you kind of went, oh, that's actually even better. You were set up for that. I do not believe in composing in the studio with a band. I think that is just an endless source of expense, waste, argument, and problems. You do it all in the pre-production before you go into the studio. You let everybody go in there with the confidence of knowing what they're doing and that something can be achieved, and then you go for it. You're looking for performance. You're looking for vitality. I never worried about what critics would say. And the reason for that is I remember reading criticisms of Dark Side of the Moon saying it was boring and it wouldn't do very well and what had happened. And, you know, other criticisms of other great records where people, Zeppelin 1, the classic. Oh my God, the English press came out and hated it. Excuse me, it's still their very best record of all time, Zeppelin 1. Fucking brilliant with its vitality and its presence. But anyway, that was the goal in the studio. The goal in the studio was performance and presence and vitality. And there was one critic, and I was shown this, and I went, okay, I know why you showed this to me, and I'm okay with that. But this critic said, this band's studio albums are more live than most bands' live albums. And when this critic wrote that, I went, thank you. Yes, you understand my approach. You understand my working ethic. So there we go. Yeah. 2 words, David Geffen.
Yeah.
And did that make, just one follow-up, did that make, because you had this process with Great White, did that make Capitol attracted to trying to get GNR when you were looking for a label with them, or were they already, or was
GNR were already, Evil, GNR were already signed to Geffen.
Okay.
When I
by
came
the time you got
board.
there. Gotcha.
They already had their new artist Geffen contract.
Gotcha.
And the circumstance there was Zoots was desperate to get them into the studio and start recording their first album. Eddie Rosenblatt, who was president of the company, said, I'm not going to allow you to go into the studio until they have management. You got to prove to me that there's something that's productive about this band, because they've already burnt through a huge wad of cash with their dealers and strippers, and they're out there creating mayhem on Sunset Strip, and you're wanting me to put more money into them. Get a manager.
Gotcha. That makes more sense.
And of course, the hilarious thing, Evil, is this. My question to you is, how come I ended up managing Guns N' Roses? And the answer is, because nobody else would. Everybody else ran for the fucking hills. Stiefel and Phillips, who were managing them at the time when I took my first meetings with Slash and Co., could not get away from them fast enough. We're done. We can't deal with these people, which is part of what sucked me in. The initial impression that sucked me in was actually Slash, that he was English, that he was articulate, that he was charming, very eloquent. And that made me think, okay, this is more than just your dumbass guitar player from Sunset. There's something going on here. And of course, I'm sure you figured it out, that I eventually sat there and I go, I've got a friend of mine who's desperately trying to get my enlistment. And he's sat in my living room and said, this could be the end of my career. I've got egg on my face on this at the moment. You need to help me out. And of course, maybe I got out one of my cheroots and I had a quiet moment. And I thought to myself, you know, this is so fucked up. I can't be blamed. If this thing doesn't do well, it's not my fault. I'm just one more in a stream of people who came in and said, I can make this work for you. So I knew it wasn't going to damage me. On the other hand, I started to think, you know, if I make this work, it might do me a little bit of good. And it might be worthwhile doing, in that I was really concerned and nervous about dissipating my energies away from Great White, because we'd been signed to a major label and dropped and become lepers, and no one wanted to go near us. And having got them back on a label, I had to make that work. I had to pull that through, and I was really torn about dissipation of energy. But in the end, I went for it, and of course, the rest is 30-year-old history. Now, it amazes me that you guys are even interested in me at this time.
Well, it's some of the best music ever made, man. I'm just going to be straight about it. So, I mean, both of those bands to me, I mean, to this day get cranked. I got cranked back when I was growing up, and it's something that I've never stopped listening to. And when I think about it,
So what you're telling me, what you're telling me, Evil, is that I could have quit on February 3rd, 1988.
There's a few years after I might say was okay, but
all right.
it's
Why
been,
would I have quit on February 3rd of 1988? It's the day after they both played at the Ritz.
The
at the
Ritz.
Ritz in New York City.
And if you want to know what those bands are about, just go and watch the Ritz film. That's it.
Yeah.
I could have quit the day after and said, done job. There it is.
Yeah, that's right.
And am I also wrong to see or feel that when reading this that the way Great White had fallen, and then you got him re-signed and you got him built back up, and you had a process that helped that happen and get them to where they needed to be. But it feels like with GNR, that process would never have been properly utilized, because the first problem starts with A and ends with L. And there's no way that I don't think that person, I mean, maybe with Appetite, but I don't think pre-production is his idea. I don't think that he likes to sit around pre-producing.
No, but on the other hand, there was an awareness within the band at that moment that they were beginning to run short of patience and indulgence at their record label. So when I'm at SIR for rehearsal and pre-production, and Axel doesn't turn up, yes, I turn around to him. And he said, well, I couldn't get a ride. And I look at him and I say, then get a fucking bus. Get here. All right? And I think at that moment, Axel just started to really dislike me.
Really?
But on the other hand, I think he knew where I was coming from. It was like we can't fuck around here, guys. You're hanging by a fucking thread. And by the way, I just had my first child, and I'm giving you my time, my energy, and taking it away from a project that I've been involved with already for 5 years, trying to get them somewhere. Don't waste my time. Don't waste your time. And I learned on Izzy an awful lot in that respect, because I knew Izzy could talk to Axe afterwards and go, you got to understand, Axe, we've got to get this done, and this guy's trying to do something with us and for us. And bless him, quite unasked and unexpected, he made a statement that I found inaccurate, wrong, but was deeply touched by. And it's on the back of the book, where he basically says, thank God Alan Niven came around, and whether anybody says it or not, he became the sixth member of the band. I'm never the sixth member of the band. I'm your fucking daddy.
Yeah.
I'm here to whoop your little pink butts and say, get on the bus. I was
But
not
that's
a member
vital.
of the band. I could not be a member of the band. It's like, my home had children in it. It was a cocaine-free zone. Okay? You didn't come to Niv's house to get fucked up. But if I went up to Slash's house on a Friday night, I didn't get back till a Sunday.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You follow?
Yeah.
So, I had my responsibilities. I had to keep an eye on an awful lot. And on top of that, I had fucking Jack Russell to deal with.
Mhm.
Oh my God, everybody says, which one of GNO is the worst? And my response is always, Jack fucking Russell was the worst.
Really? More than
Yes.
Axe? Even the donuts and everything with Axe. So even
Oh,
all through
Axe
all
is
that.
Axe was a breeze compared to Jack Russell.
Wow.
Okay.
A
Well, there you go,
fucking
people.
Wow.
breeze.
There you go.
But
There you go.
Every time the phone went involving Jack, I wondered whether we'd have a band or whether I'd have a list of days that I could go and visit in the prison.
In the prison cell.
Yeah, I mean, oh my God. His ability to destroy what we created was endless. And fortunately, at the end of his life, I spent a lot of time on the phone with him and talked to him a lot to reassure him that, yeah, you were a fucking idiotic motherfucker, but you were fucking brilliant with your vocals. You left an incredible catalogue of songs, far broader, deeper, and wider than your contemporaries. And yes, I forgive you for all the fuck ups,
Well, that's
including Rhode Island. I forgive
Yeah.
you for that. Because that's had a negative impact. I mean,
True.
I co-wrote, 50, 60 songs for them. Did they sell? No, because they're singed with the smell of burnt people. Who's going to put a Great White song in a commercial or a TV show or a movie? They're not going to do it because of that. But as stupid as it was, who takes a 15-foot firework into a gig that has a 12-foot ceiling and less than once you're on the stage? Who does that? What's the point? We never used fireworks when I was around. No point, no need, because if your songs were good enough and delivered well enough, I mean, we used to go up to Anchorage to play Alaska, and we used to call it the Light Bulb Tour, because that was the entire production.
Light
One
bulb.
fucking light bulb over the stage. If your band was good enough, you could still get the whole room standing on its chairs and find yourself running around the auditorium trying to avoid the fire marshal who wants to grab you so that you go on stage and tell your band to slow down because he doesn't want everybody standing on their chairs. It's dangerous. If you're good, you can get the energy, you can get the impact, you can get the moment. You don't need the fireworks, but
Well, and I know that
I think
wasn't their fault because I saw them just a few months before that happened with Ty and Mark, the same lineup, and there was no fireworks at the club I saw them at. There was none of that going on. So for them to be blamed for that seemed pretty ridiculous to me.
yes and no. I'm going to say yes and no. And believe you me, guys, I've had this conversation with Jack because for a long time I was on his ass going, you have got to have a mea culpa. You have got to apologize for this, and you haven't done it readily yet. And he's going, well, I'm going to do it in my book. I've got a film coming. I'm going to do it in that. And I was advised by my lawyers I shouldn't apologize back in the day. And I said, well, it's not back in the day now. You need to make it really clear that it hurts and that you have pain from it. And the yes and no as to whether they get blamed or not. If I were there, it would have been my responsibility. At the end of the day, that band, I called the shots. I wasn't there, so then next up calls the shots. And for me, next up is Jack. Your responsibility, what's going on the stage, what you play, where you stay, where you eat, all your responsibilities. You're the head guy, because I'm not there. If I'd been there, I'd be head guy for you. All you got to do is get fucked up and sing. All right.
I think he had Obi by then. Wasn't that someone in the picture there?
Yeah. There's a Henley song. And for me, Henley in his solo career definitely carries a significant weight in his observations and descriptions. And there's a line in one of his songs where he says, I think it's about forgiveness. And in terms of why are we here, why do we have to endure this particular world, why we have to put up with other idiotic people, if there's a rational sense to it, to me, it's for me to learn to be forgiving. So in the case of the Rhode Island fire, as much as I could, I expressed my forgiveness to Jack. And I think he needed that.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good fucking luck. There is one person I haven't known in my
Who's
life
not gonna
where
rest.
RIP does not apply.
He's not.
Well, that's our
Not
sentiments. I
gonna
don't know if he's
apply
thinking that.
Yeah, no. He is up
Having
there
a party?
fucking raging, and everybody's going, yeah, he'll be up there raging.
Well, he's
raging
at
with
the
everybody.
rainbow in heaven.
holding
That's where he's at
court.
right now. Yeah.
You got it exactly on. And there is a line of girls.
But there
under
are
the
people
table.
like Jack and me that might feel at peace in an atmosphere like that, having something to drink and smoke and some pizza and some girls and doing all the debauchery. That's just the way we live. So
Yes, exactly.
that
And
is
then you
peace.
call me at 4:30 in the morning and ask if I got bail.
Exactly, because we're locked up. We need help. Well, yeah, it'd be me or Audie Desbro calling you. Hey, we got a problem.
Yeah.
Oh boy. So how we doing on time, Alan? Because I know you have somewhere to
Yeah.
be.
Do you want another? I can do you another 15 if you want.
Okay, we could do.
I mean,
Let
if
me
I haven't
throw
got you-
one in, and then I'll punt it back to Evil because
I mean, if I'm not boring the shit
no,
out
no.
of you.
So I know you mentioned that you kept the tape rolling, and there's some brilliant moments, and you had the sequencing and things like that, and from time to time you had leftover material. Can you give me the backstory on who brought in that wasted Rock Ranger? Because it's not a Great White original, but it
No.
totally fits Jack. You could totally see
think?
Jack living that lifestyle.
You think? Damned if I can remember his name. But if I recall correctly, this guy was Slash's guitar tech of the moment. And we might have been recording Appetite by then. But somebody mentioned to me that this guy had a goofy song and I should hear it. And of course, half my life I'm trying to avoid goofy songs and leave that up to the Warrants and Poisons of the world. You want me to go and listen to a goofy song? Oh, I'm going, whatever. And he gave me a tape of this thing, and I listened to it, and I went, this is comedic genius. I love this. So I went back to him and I said, listen, I'm in the middle of recording Great White at the moment, and I would love to have the band work up a version of this. Can I do that? And his response is on the level of, really? You would? You'd record this? And I go, let me record it and see what you think about it. So we recorded it down in Total Access. The guy who wrote it loved it. And I thought it would be perfect for a B-side. That it was absolutely right down the middle of the road for humor, self-deprecation, and the ability not to take ourselves excessively seriously. I thought it would weigh well with the heavier songs, that we could have both. And it went on the B-side of Once Bitten, Twice Shy.
Yeah, right.
And that meant Once Bitten, Twice Shy, I think he fell short of 1 million sales by 20,000 units. I mean, it was right there. If we'd been on Geffen, we'd have been at 1.5 million. But at Capitol, we almost got the 1 millionth sale. So he got his writer royalty on 1 million sales of his goofy song. I think he bought a house.
Nice.
So it's a lovely story.
Sure. Nice.
Right on. That's cool.
What you got anything else there, Evil?
Well, I think we should just end it with give us the funniest or oddest or craziest Jack story you had. What was you've had the calls. What was the one where you were like, how did you, what, where, you, why?
The most disastrous one that we never recovered from was when Great White were on their first headline tour with MSG and Havana Black opening. And we had already sold out in the northeast of the country. And that was a tough market. You know, up in the Rust Belt up there weren't an awful lot of disposable dollars. So if people were going to buy all the tickets for a rock and roll show, you knew that they really wanted to go to a rock and roll show, and you better say thank yous when you're up there, because it was a tough market to sell out. And we started out somewhere like Santa Barbara. No, not Santa Barbara. What's the city out to the east of LA on the 10? Help me out here with my memory, Ruben.
I don't know.
What's that
East
city?
on the 10.
On the 10.
You're in Riverside County.
Thank
Were you talking about
you.
Riverside?
that area? Yes.
Started out there.
Moreno Valley. Yeah, there.
And then they're off across, you know, Arizona, heading into Texas. And on this particular day, they were playing Midland.
Oh, yeah.
Tickets are so well. It's a Texas audience. What could go wrong? I take the day off, take my kid to Disneyland, who was 3 or 4 at the time, never been. I just stop by the office and get a couple of things done. And Oddie calls me and says, "You need to find Jack." And it doesn't compute with me. In my brain, there's an orderly structure where I can close my eyes and I can see the buses at the gig and know what they're doing at which time of the day, and everything's going to be fine. And Midland's not a major market. I don't have to be there. Da 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 da. And it turns out that Jack got thrown off a plane in Phoenix because he's fucked up. Oddie, what is he doing on a plane to Phoenix? You're playing Midland tonight. Oh, well, he wanted to come home. What? So, no Disneyland, straight to the airport, straight out to Phoenix on a plane. I called a friend of mine called Ray Brown, who was a tailor, made stage clothes for everybody who lived in Phoenix. And I said, do me a favor, get to the fucking airport, find Russell, get him to your house before he gets fucking arrested. And bless his heart, he did that. He found Russell, took him to his home. I walk out into the backyard of his house, and there's Russell sitting in front of a Sowero, talking to it in a profound way. So, not to be abusively intrusive into their conversation, I walk up very gently and put my hand on Jack's shoulder and quietly say, Jack. And the fucker turns round with this shit-eating grin on his face and goes, Niv, got some shit for you too, because this cactus has got some profound wisdoms. True story.
Oh.
And at that point, I had to pick him up and take him home, because here was my philosophy, Evil. If I have to lose a tour, I'll lose a tour. What I won't do is I won't lose one of my musicians. I am not going to bring him home in a cardboard box.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. If he's at that point where he's talking to a cactus in Arizona when he's supposed to be in Texas at a gig, he
Something's wrong.
Right.
needs some reconstruction in his thinking process, which includes what he puts in his nose or his mouth or his veins. So,
Well,
and that was the end of, I mean, they never got another chance to become a headliner
Right.
after that. That's
right.
They lost big time through that. But, you know, I didn't lose my singer.
Right. Well, thanks so much for your time. And I
Well,
think
thank
the
you
only
for adjusting. It's always a pleasure to talk with you guys.
you know, I think the one thing I will warn people, pull out your thesaurus as you're reading this, look up any words that Alan uses throughout the book, because I did. I mean, there were some words in there that I'm like, I better look it up. But
And everybody,
Sound and
right.
Fury out June 24th. You can pick it up on Amazon. I pre-ordered
Yep.
it. I know Evil
I got it
pre-ordered it. I
pre-ordered.
know Andrew
Yep.
pre-ordered it. So
Hey,
we've been spreading the
take it
word.
easy there, guys. I mean, you know, I am English, or rather raised in England. I was actually born in New Zealand, raised in England. I do speak English, not American. So there might be a couple of English words in there that might be not in common use.
Right. Right.
You ever go back to England or New Zealand? Do you have family there?
Evil, I hate leaving fucking Prescott.
There you go.
Go fucking figure.
Well, my Evil's
Mountain, Arizona.
Evil
I'm
has family in in Williamson.
You do.
Yes, right there on the hill.
And you have to come.
Yes.
You have to knock on the door. And we have to go and break bread together when you're out visiting your relatives.
Absolutely. I come down about once a year, and I know the beauty and the peacefulness of that area. And yes, it's amazing.
It's the 3-day rule, Evil. It should be the same for girlfriends, fish, visitors, and traveling. You know, fish has to go after 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
The girl should go after 3 days, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-oh.
I have to be home here after 3 days in LA.
Yeah.
Right.
I cannot deal with LA. and there is nowhere else that I particularly want to go. Occasionally, I get a little bit of cabin fever. Small town. Take me anywhere for 3 days, and I want to come back. Go figure. The one thing I miss here is I loved the ocean. I loved living next to the ocean. I loved the negative ions that would come off the ocean. There were countless times I'd be in total access, and we'd be hitting the wall. There'd be stress, pressure. It wasn't flowing. Everybody was working on it as opposed to playing with it. And my favorite thing to do was to put somebody in my car, drive them down to the Esplanade, Redondo Beach, and just sit there by the water and let the negative ions come in and people relax. And then the other thing I'd do is I'd usually have something like an old Beatles record on the car stereo. And I'd turn around and I'd go, what I want you to do right now is apply a critical technical ear to what you're listening to. Don't listen to it as a song. I want your studio concentration. And they'd sit there for a minute and go, and they'd look puzzled and they'd go, he's fucking off there. He's off pitch there. And I'm going, exactly. And which Beatles classic are we listening to? And they go, okay, I get it. Let's go back and play. Don't get so tight. Most people don't notice. Perfection in recording, we'll close on this. The perfection in recording, as far as I'm concerned, was always in knowing which imperfections to leave. Because that made it human.
Nice.
Something that's too perfect, your shoulders begin to crimp. Something that's a little loose around the edges sends you looking for another fifth.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alan.
Always a pleasure with you guys. I enjoy your conversations. It's fun. It's not work.
Right. Well, thank you so
Love
much.
talking to you, man.
It's
Thank
good
you for coming
chatting
on.
with you, and best with the book. Again, we'll mention again, Sound and Fury, June 24th. You can pick it up on Amazon, like I did and Evil did. So there we go.
Awesome. Thank you,
Go
guys.
get it.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you, sir.
Raise your horns